There we go. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Welcome to everyone today. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we are here with Naya, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience within the law field, as well as her being a teacher and an educator, which I think a lot of people will be very fascinated about. So, Nia, thank you once again for joining the Pre-Law Chatterers today. If you would like to start off by just telling us a bit about your experience and how you ended up in the law field.
Sure. So I'm just going to take a second and share my screen with you all, if it allows me.
Yep, I can see it right now.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for inviting me today, everyone. And as Christina mentioned, my name is Ghomashchi. I'm a licensed barrister and solicitor, as well as an Ontario certified teacher. So today I will walk you through sort of my personal journey and how I became a lawyer and how I ended up in the teaching world afterwards. So I'll take you through my undergrad, my whole experience with LSAT and admissions, law school itself, practice, and then how I sort of moved into the teaching world and any sort of advice that I have coming out of that. So this is sort of the timeline that I worked with throughout my journey. So I graduated from York University with a Bachelor of Arts in 2009, and I actually took a year off to study for the LSAT and really get my head in the game before I went into law school. So I started law school in September of 2010. As you know, it's 3 years. So I graduated in 2013 and actually ended up writing my bar exam while I was articling because I was the first in my class to start my articling position. So it was a little early and it kind of fell in all together at once. And then I was called to the bar in 2014. So for my undergrad, I chose to do a Bachelor of Arts with honors. And really the word honors is just a fancy way of saying that it's a 4-year program instead of a 3-year program. So I did that at York University, and that gave me a chance to double major in history and law and society. So history was kind of my favorite subject in high school, so it was a natural choice for me. The law and society I chose intentionally because it was kind of the only subject I could see that had a direct connection to law. So I knew in high school that I really wanted to go into something where I had a chance to make a difference, to leave the world a different place than when I came into it. And going into law school kind of seemed like the natural choice, especially with what you see on TV and how it's so glamorous and fulfilling, and you see them making a huge difference. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with my life. And that's why I chose that major. So as far as the LSAT goes, I had pretty good grades while I was doing my undergrad. I had an A average, but I absolutely hated the LSAT. I struggled with this one a lot, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. So even today, when I kind of look back at the types of questions that are in there, I find them to be absolute gibberish and ridiculous, especially the ones where I don't remember what the categories are called, but I remember there being paragraphs and you had to answer questions on the paragraphs, and none of them sort of jived with logic. And even today, I find that it's not really an accurate reflection of whether you're going to be a good lawyer or not. So one thing that I can tell anyone who's looking to go into law school is don't let that LSAT score bring you down. It's not indicative of anything. I've known people who, like myself, were terrible at the LSAT and ended up killing the bar and having successful careers afterwards. And I've seen the reverse as well. I've seen people who have done really well on the LSAT, but absolutely bombed the bar and just weren't very great lawyers afterwards. So there's not necessarily a correlation between those two things. I did take a prep course for it. I went with Kaplan, which I did find to be helpful, especially with the logic games. So after that, I applied to Windsor Law and University of Ottawa Faculty of Law. And I ended up going with Windsor for 2 reasons. So first, I was really, really attracted to their sort of equity approach and focus on access to justice. I really loved that about them. And secondly, I really like the fact that they had this more holistic approach to admission. So they didn't just kind of look at your LSAT score and count that as 1 year, like many of the other schools do, they look at the whole person and see what you have to contribute to their institution as well as the profession as a whole. So I really like the idea of Windsor Law, and that's where I ended up going. So my first year of law school, contrary to what I heard it was going to be absolutely brutal. Ended up being not so bad at all in terms of the academics. Where I did struggle, though, was from a mental health perspective, because I was working at the same time. I was maybe one of two people who was holding down a job at the same time. So it was a little bit tough. Combine that with all the volunteer work that you have to do while you're in law school. And it really calls for taking care of yourself and understanding self-care. And I didn't have that sort of idea at the time. So I did struggle a little bit with mental health first year. And I guess that would be, if I had a piece of advice for anyone thinking of going into law school, or if I could tell myself this before I went to law school, would be to stress less and network more. So, in terms of the mental health aspect of it, you are going to be in a position where you're going to have to juggle a million things at the same time. And so self-care becomes really important. By second and third year, I kind of picked that up, and I figured out that I really do need to go out more and do things that I enjoy. I remember first year, I would be studying my butt off, reading every single case, pulling all-nighters, sitting in the front row. And then there'd be people in my class kind of going out partying and drinking and getting notes from each other. So the notes wouldn't have really helped me, but those connections are huge in this industry. So making those connections right off the bat when you get into law school, really, really important. Having a good relationship with your profs, and then having those connections carry forward throughout your career is a big one. In terms of my favorite course in law school, this one was kind of something that I fell into accidentally. I was looking for a course to just kind of fill this empty slot that I had in my timetable, and I ended up registering for Indigenous Legal Traditions, and it turned out to be one of the most informative, interesting, and life-changing courses that I've ever taken. It still, to this day, kind of informs my practice in both law and in teaching. It was just such a welcome break from the sort of traditional and colonial model of legal system that we have. So to kind of be able to be creative and think outside the box, that was something that I really appreciated about this particular course. Other than that, I was involved in Pro Bono Students Canada, which is a student-led organization where you essentially get connected to different organizations and you do pro bono work for them. So I was connected with Canadian Mental Health Association. So we created legal pamphlets for them. We would put on community events where both staff from CMHA would come in, or community members would come in, and they would be receiving legal information about things like immigration issues, how that's connected to mental health, and what they can do to help their clients with immigration issues, and so on. So great opportunity. I met a lot of amazing people doing that. I was also a research and teaching assistant to one of my profs, and we ended up publishing a case comment together before, I think it was, fell right before I graduated from law school. So that was also an amazing experience. Lots of different things that you can get involved with. And by the way, I saw the chat going off a second ago. I don't know if anybody had a question, but I won't be able to see it while I'm in PowerPoint mode. So feel free to just let me know if there's anything there. And then, of course, comes practice. So while you're in law school, it's really easy to sort of think that you are so busy and you have absolutely no time for anything. And trust me, you will complain about your schedule and all the things that you have to do. And then you sort of get to practice and you're like, wow, that was a vacation compared to practice. So appreciate law school while you can. That's a big piece of advice that I would give. So I always intended to go into labor and employment law. That was kind of one of my passions, but for some reason I kept getting calls from a bunch of different personal injury firms. So somehow I ended up in the personal injury world for my articling position, and I ended up being hired back as an associate. So this was a personal injury firm in Scarborough, and they were incredibly busy. Very, very busy firm, to the point that perhaps they were taking on too many cases for the number of lawyers that they had in, which was not a good thing. But the upside of that was that it exposed me to a variety of different tasks that I wouldn't have been able to experience otherwise. So 1 week into my articling, I was already doing mediations by myself. 2 weeks in, I was doing examination for discoveries by myself. And if you have no idea what either of those things are, don't worry, you'll learn one day, don't worry. It's coming. And just shortly after I was called to the bar, I actually had the chance to appear before the Court of Appeal for Ontario on a matter. So that was an amazing experience. You kind of walk in and it's like larger than life. And I hope you all get to experience that one day. It was amazing. So in terms of practice, I mean, one of the things I loved about being a lawyer has to do directly with some of these things that I got exposure to that I wouldn't have otherwise. I was lucky enough to have my mentor, who I still keep in touch with, Murray Dahab, amazing lawyer, absolutely fearless. So her and I, we just had this incredible combination where her sort of gutsiness and creativity matched with my writing skills and my ability to kind of see what people want to hear, how they process information and all of that. We had a winning combination together and tackled a lot of things that people with maybe 50 years of experience don't get to do, which is absolutely amazing. That feeling of being in the cusp of something, making a change in the law, see it unfold before your eyes. That's what I absolutely loved the most. What I loved the least about being a lawyer is, I guess it would have to do with the irony of how sort of traditional and inflexible our legal system can be at times. The law is often seen as this sort of vehicle for change. And yet, in many different ways, the profession is kind of stuck and in some ways intentionally designed to kind of maintain the status quo and those very injustices that a lot of us go into the law trying to fight, right? So it can be very disheartening to see that. I'm sure every lawyer encounters it at some point, but you just kind of have to work through it. And that's one of the things that you as a lawyer can make it your mission to change. So I spent about 2 years at that firm, and then I left to start my own practice. I did that for a while. And that gave me an opportunity to do something on the side that I'd always wanted to do. And that was teaching. So I taught law at the post-secondary level at a few different colleges in Ontario. So I taught in their paralegal programs, their law clerk programs, and things like that. And this actually kind of made me fall back in love with teaching. So growing up, I had always loved it. I remember playing with my stuffed animals, and I'd be their teacher, and I'd kind of come home and teach them everything that I learned in school and play around that way. But I never really explored it as a career, simply because I'd just always seen the law as the way of making a change in the world. So I didn't explore it. I kind of put it away, and I put my passion into teaching. So doing this just kind of rekindled that love. And I thought, I have to pursue this further. So I decided to go for my Bachelor of Education. It really reminded me of, one, how much I love teaching, and two, that I was able to make more of a difference in one day of teaching than I could in 1,000 lifetimes of practicing law. And that's different for everybody, right? I've met people who have done the reverse. So I know someone who was a teacher and she thought she wasn't making a difference. So she went into law and she's quite happy there. So it's a testament to how we all sort of experience things a bit differently. So I am currently now an Ontario certified teacher, and I do also have my social media platforms that I try to teach a wider audience with. So I've got a Lawyer to Teacher YouTube channel, and once you get to law school, you'll see that a lot of those people who are charged with teaching you, who might be great lawyers, are not necessarily the best at teaching law. So this is kind of what I use to help anyone who is really struggling or needs a better way of being taught these legal concepts. So it works for anyone who's in high school, in law school, paralegal program, whatever you happen to be into. I've also got an Instagram page that I basically try to kind of pick up where I left off with the advocacy that I was doing as a lawyer. So advice, if I had to give anyone advice, I guess I'll categorize it in two different categories. So one would be for getting into law school. So my advice for getting into law school would be to start now. There's no time like the present. So you're not there yet, but everything that you do right now is, believe it or not, going to reflect on you some way once you do get into law school. And it's not just about, what you put on the social media. I'm sure you've heard the lectures about, what goes on the internet stays on the internet. So being careful what you post and how that reflects upon you later down the line. It's what I'm referring to is more about the sort of activities, the extracurriculars that you do now, and those things that go into your resume that make a difference later on. So if you decide, say, to apply to a law school that has a theme much like Windsor Law of access to justice, you're going to have to demonstrate how that fits into your goals and fits into your past. So much like a credit history where you wouldn't just kind of go in, pay your bills 1 month and expect to get good credit the next month, you have to build it over a series of years. So if you want to go into human rights, then I suggest getting involved with some kind of NGO that you do work with, whether it be from a legal perspective or not. That will still give you insight, even if you're not doing legal work for them. Anything that you can really do to demonstrate your interest in whatever area it is. And if you don't know what you want to do, that can be tough. And in that case, I would maybe pick something that's a little bit more versatile and you can approach it from different angles. But if you know what area of law you want to go into, now is the time to start building that history. The other thing I would say for getting into law schools, to be well-rounded and persistent and resilient. So law schools in their personal statements that you guys give them will be looking to see that you can juggle a variety of different things so that you can handle studying, your pro bono work that you're going to do, the volunteering, the community legal clinics that you may become involved with, your sports, whatever else. They also want to know that you're persistent, resilient, and that you're capable of improvement. So to give you examples of situations that demonstrate your resilience, that's a great strategy. Something that I did that worked for me is, as I mentioned, LSAT wasn't my strong suit. So I addressed that in my personal statement. I made sure to mention that each time I took it, my score consistently improved. So that showed that I was open to improvement and that I would keep at it until I got it. As far as advice going forward after law school, first and foremost, I would say love yourself and love what you do. There's going to be hard times, a lot of them, especially when you're articling or you're working for somebody else. And so it's really, really important to have that sense of passion and purpose, because that's what's going to carry you through all of those difficult times. And I also say love yourself, because a lot of us who go into law have this sort of personality trait in common where we're perfectionists. We have very high standards for ourselves. And that can be really hurtful in an industry like this where there's no such thing as perfection. You just can't be perfect. It's not possible. There's no time. And you're going to have too much on your plate to worry about those tiny little details. So coming to terms with the fact that you won't be able to achieve perfection, but you can still achieve greatness, that's an important one. Second piece is something that's not just applicable to law, but can apply to life in general, is know your audience. So whether that's your reader that you're writing written submissions for, your interviewer, your opponent, whoever it is in the context, you want to make sure that you know them and what impresses them and so on. When you're writing a personal statement, you don't want to just write to write. You want to, of course, write for the law school that you're applying to. If you're writing to Windsor Law, for example, you can't get in without addressing access to justice. It's just as simple as that, right? You have to get to know your audience. If you're interviewing for a firm, you have to know what that organization is all about and what kind of image they want to give off. And the same goes for practice. You're going to get to know your judges, your masters, arbitrators, mediators, whoever you're working with. And last piece of advice is that the world does not end at being a lawyer. So, you can go to law school, come out and think, this is not for me. I've had many people who have had that experience. I practiced for a few years before I decided to switch careers, but a lot of people know right away that it's not for them. And that's totally okay, because there's lots of options out there for you. I've seen people go into law enforcement, into business, starting their own business. I mean, the sky is the limit. So don't be discouraged if you find that that this isn't for you. It's not starting over, it's starting from experience, and there's a difference. And I think that's it. And I'm going to leave it to you guys to ask me questions.
Thank you for that. That was so well put together. I mean, honestly, you covered everything that I was going to ask you. So thank you for that. Very, very so well done, honestly. So if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. So I do know, just to kind of start off the question debate, that there were a few questions like in regards to why it is that you chose to become a lawyer and then to change your career path. So if you want to expand a little bit about that, and I will let Noel ask you a question after that. You can go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so really it was just about seeing the sort of difference that I could make. I mean, I'd always known growing up, even before I knew what career I wanted to go into, that I just wanted to do something that made an impact. And I certainly made an impact practicing as a lawyer, but I ran into a lot of walls in terms of the fact that we work within the bounds of an institution that's very traditional, very colonial, and even at times faced with things like discrimination. So, I've been to interviews where I faced discrimination within the job itself. So it's not, even though it's an industry where you kind of have that expectation that this be the industry that fights discrimination, that still happens within itself. So those were the things that I sort of found discouraging. But they weren't really the reason I left. The reason I left was more having to do with the pull from the teaching end. I'd always loved it, as I mentioned earlier, and I couldn't resist the pull anymore. I saw the difference that I made every single day in a classroom, and how my students were different from when they first came in. They left more confident. They left being able to tackle the world, even if they didn't end up going into law. And that was just irresistible to me. The other thing would be just sort of in terms of that whole making a difference idea, being able to reach people before they get to a stage where problems happen. As a lawyer, you're very much reacting to problems rather than preventing them. So this is a chance where I get to kind of meet people before they grow into the full human beings that they are for the rest of their lives, and to tackle really important issues like racism and sexism and other equity issues before they have a chance to experience them for themselves. So one lesson that I like to do very often is the wrongful conviction. So we tackle that a lot in my classrooms, where we talk about the connection between race and wrongful conviction. And just seeing people sort of shift focus and ask questions that they didn't ask themselves before, that to me is more impactful than anything I could do in a courtroom.
Yeah, that's really well said. Very well said. I mean, that's so true. Like, why would you want to be somewhere where sometimes you're really not the most accepted? And why would you want to stay there when you can do something that's going to change someone's life, even in the smallest way? So I think that's great. That's great advice to those who are watching today. I know that Noel, I hope I'm saying that right, had a question. You
Yeah,
raised
you're saying my name right.
Okay.
I had the same question that you just asked. I just want to build on it. So I am personally pursuing a career in teaching, and then I hope to be somewhere down I don't even know, in 5 years or so, go to law school. That's something like that's in the back of my head. But after listening to, I believe you prefer being called Nia.
Yes.
that you weren't facing, like you were facing discrimination within the field, and that discouraged you in a way, and you rediscovered, or not rediscovered, you transitioned into this new passion of yours is teaching. So I feel like both of these careers in a way are lined up in a way that you can, because personally I'm very passionate about social justice. As a person of color, I feel like there's lack of representation of people of color in these fields. So I feel like it just starts with us. Like I feel like, and it's unfortunate that you felt that way in your time of practicing law. But would you say, is that someone, if you were to look at me as a younger version of yourself, what would you say in terms of going out in the law world? Like, how is it? Because like, I know I'm taking an opposite approach like you did. You went from law to teaching, and I want to go from teaching to law. So I feel like that would just kind of give me something to fall back on if I'm just like, if I don't like law for that reason. So I just, if you're comfortable, I just want to, and if want to know if you are willing to open up a bit more about how you felt discriminated, in what sense, and why was it even allowed, and were you not, I just wanted to, if you can, explore that aspect a bit.
Thank you. That was a great question, Noel. And certainly I don't want anything I've said to be interpreted as like me discouraging anyone from going into law, and that there's discrimination everywhere. It's not that. What I was trying to say is that you face discrimination like everywhere else, whereas in going into the legal field, you sort of have this higher expectation that this not be there, right? You would think that this would be the one place where you wouldn't see sort of examples of discrimination and things like that. So it's not that, it's worse than anywhere else or anything like that. As far as what I would say to you going in, I would say, I mean, the experience is absolutely different for every single person. It's going to be different based on the firm that you work at. It's going to be different based on the type of law that you approach. Like I've said, I've seen plenty of people like yourself doing the reverse, going in from teaching to law, right? And then I've seen people leave law for something else. It's really almost impossible to say whether, generally speaking, law is good or it's not. So I think the only way to find out is to kind of go in for yourself and find out how your experience with it is. What I would say, though, is that this is an industry that takes a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of sweat, blood, and tears. And so if it's not something that you love to your core, I would say explore other options. But if you love it and you really are passionate about it, and it sounds like you are, especially when it comes to social justice issues, then absolutely, I would encourage you to go into it and be that force of change, right? Every institution that we see change in, there was always somebody in from the inside that chose to make that change. So with instances of discrimination within the legal industry, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to take someone from the inside to go ahead and make those changes. And that could be you. It could start with you or someone else in this room. And as far as specific examples of discrimination, I mean, I don't want to get into too much detail, but there would be little things like microaggressions. There would be firms looking to hire a certain sort of image. There would be instances where you could just tell that you'd need to change your name or something about yourself in order to fit with that image. So little things like that. There wasn't really anything sort of outright horrible. No horror stories.
Like, I don't want to, I just want to add into it. I feel like it's been a struggle for people of color, especially, and women too, because I feel like these fields are so dominated by males. And now women are, reaching new heights, and we're breaking that stereotype of, and I feel like there's just so much systemic and institutionalized racism too, and now it's coming to light. And I feel like even in the teaching career, I see like most of my coworkers are predominantly white. Not that I have anything against them, but as a person of color, you feel that microaggression, like you said, you feel like you're inferior in a way. And it's just so sad, especially like when you're in Canada, you feel like this is a land of equal opportunity. And I feel like it's just such a deeply rooted issue, and it will take some time. Like it is still prevalent. And as a teacher, I want to change that in my classroom, like encourage my students to have a open mindset and, be inclusive and all that, and take that approach to my teaching. And I feel like, and in the law field too, there needs to be more representation of people of color. I feel like there needs to be more Indigenous people in these fields, and so that we can be the voice for people like us that are going through this. So I greatly appreciate you opening up about that. It's definitely something I can relate to. So yeah, thank you.
No problem, my pleasure.
Thank you, Noel, for that very great conversation. It's a conversation that I think a lot of people don't necessarily want to have sometimes, but it's great to hear it from somebody who is so candid and someone who is willing to share their experience with the younger generation. So thank you for answering that. I know that Aisha had a question, and her question said that you seem to have a very positive and inspiring mindset. Were you always like this? If not, so how did you transition to this and gain more confidence in yourself and your goals?
Gosh, Aisha, great question, and deep question too. Oh my gosh, I got to reevaluate my whole life. Well, thank you for that compliment. That's wonderful to hear that I come off that way. I think I don't think that I always have a positive attitude. It is certainly something that I strive for. I've always been kind of a get up, rub some dirt in it and move on kind of person. Like I don't allow myself to get down, and that's partially because I've always struggled with anxiety my whole life, and keeping the movement going, getting up and just getting through the day. That's always been a coping mechanism for me. And sometimes you just need to tell yourself it's going to be okay, because anxiety has a way of sort of overinflating those negative things in your mind. So that's something I actively try to do. I don't always succeed. No one does. Anyone who's felt sort of feelings of self-doubt and anxiety before will know that. So yeah, you kind of learn to get better at it. I don't think life ever gets easier in general. You just get better at coping with it. And certainly all the hardships that I went through before law school, during practice, these things all helped me really build resilience. All of the things that went wrong in my articling position that I thought were disasters and wanted to send me home crying, those things all in a way contributed to me becoming stronger and learning better coping mechanisms. So the person that you see in the mirror right now is going to be very different than the person that you see 20 years from now. And I don't mean the aging, I just mean I mean that you will build that resilience and that self-confidence and learn something new every day.
That was really well said. I think she raised her hand too, so Aisha,
go ahead, Aisha.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, because I think that was a really beautiful answer, and it was honestly like it was what I was looking for. And I just have another question as well. So, being an educator, it is still a very, I guess, demanding job. I think teachers work really hard, and a lot of the time they work kind of overtime coming up with what they're going to teach, whether it's grading papers or anything like that. And then, of course, being a lawyer is also a very demanding job. So how do you suggest, from your own experience, how you balance your time or kind of set aside time for yourself or for family? Because one thing that kind of scares me about potentially going down the legal field is, am I going to have a life outside of my job? Like, am I going to be able to balance, things that I want to do or my own personal goals in terms of like family or like a home or things like that? Like, so I just kind of want to know what your experience is like with that.
Great question again. The work-life balance issue is always a tough one, and it's something that you will kind of struggle with in law school, after law school. It really comes down to realizing that the work is always going to be there, your job is always going to be there, but there's only one you, and your health, whether it be physical or mental, is something that you can never get back, and you have to prioritize it. It's just a question of saying, this is more important, and I have to give it that time and attention. So, doing little things like, hey, I'm not going to answer emails after, such and such time, or I'm not going to work on my Sunday. Maybe I'll put in a few hours on a Saturday, but Sunday is just for my family. Just taking those little steps and really prioritizing your health, I think, is the best way to figure out that work-life balance. And I'm not going to lie, it'll be tough in the beginning, especially when you're articling, because you're trying to prove yourself, right? And you want to get rehired and all of those things. But you do get better at it with time, as long as you prioritize yourself, because no one else is going to do that for you.
That was a great answer. Thank you so much.
Right.
I
Thank
kind of
you
had
so
a follow-up
much.
to that too. Was that, how do you know that you're not taking too much care of yourself? Because I'm like that too. Like will sometimes not do anything for a day, and then I'm like, man, like, does that mean that I'm not doing enough? Does it mean that I'm weak? Does it mean that I'm this or I'm that? So how do you kind of find the balance?
Oh gosh, wow. Every person's different, right? Like, I show probably different signs of being overworked than you do. For me, I remember if I called in sick one day or I didn't show up to one class, I would just get this overwhelming feeling of dread, like I'm missing something. What do the kids call it these days? FOMO, fear of missing out. It was so overwhelming, and like I said, that doesn't go away. These things that are part of who you are and your personality, they don't go away. You just learn to manage them better. So just kind of recognizing those signs and telling yourself, it is okay if I just take one day. It is okay if I'm 5 minutes late with this. Obviously not things like legal documents that you have to file. You can't be late with those. Don't mess around with those. But ask for help, right? Not every task needs to be done by you. Delegate anything that you can ask help for or do as a team. Those all really help. And you got to learn to get to know yourself, right? To kind of listen to that voice that is telling you, I need a break.
Oh, we got two people who raised their hands. Okay, so first we'll go with Noel, and then we'll go with Aisha again.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to it. Like, I just want to share my personal experience with being extremely busy. As someone that loves to just commit to everything, I find myself very overwhelmed. And over the years, I've learned that it's very important to say no. And I think that's also in the education career that I've been taught, that as a teacher too, you're gonna want to do so many things, like, stay after school, coach a volleyball team, do this, do that. Admin is going to come up to you, tell you to do this and that, but you as a person need to know your limits. And I think you need to set that boundaries. And most people respect that when you let them know what your boundaries are. I think that's the key. Like, including your family and friends, they will understand when you communicate. I think that is really the key. And just going from my past experience, I have reached a point where I've been extremely burnt out and I've been knocked out for like days, and that's not a good position to be in. So taking a day off is nothing. It's like very much needed. I would say, like, take as many breaks as you can. I'm without any guilt. I just don't I know as it comes, and I've been there, we feel guilty about taking breaks and we're not doing enough. And I think it's just us, our brains can only hold up so much information, and we need that day to just that information to just, you know, sit with us. And I think taking breaks is very important. So that's just me just adding my personal experience to
Well,
that question.
think about the laptop that you work on, right? It needs to be restarted. It needs to be recharged. Humans are no different. We need to be restarted occasionally and recharge. And something beautiful that someone once said to me about that is, no is a complete sentence. Process that. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify. If it's something that needs to be done from a mental, physical perspective, you just have to do it, and you stop feeling guilty about it. You'll never completely achieve that, but you can try. You've got to try.
And I feel like it's people glamorize doing so many things at once as you being I feel like there's this notion out there that the more you do, the more of a value you have as a person, but it's okay to not, you know, like not do everything. Like I know we're also tempted to be committed to this and that, and just taking things one at a time, and everyone's different, obviously. Some people thrive this way, and I would say take less classes if you need to. You don't have to take the full course load if you want to volunteer and be more involved in the community or work. Whatever, like mental health and physical health comes before anything, in my personal opinion, because you got to take care of you. At the end of the day, if you're not taking care of you, every aspect of your life is going to suffer. So put yourself first before anything. And it doesn't matter where you are at your journey. You don't need to compare. I think that's also something we fall into the trap of, comparing ourselves to others. So we just got to be kind to ourselves.
Yep, absolutely.
That
Nadine,
was
did you have a question?
Hi, Nia. First of all, I wanted to thank you so much for this informative session. I love the way that you explained your journey so concisely, but also you gave out your message, and it was really nice. I really like the way you presented your story. And I also really, like Aisha said, I really love your attitude of positivity and inspiration. My question for you would be, I understand from what you talked about today that social justice is one of your passions and one of the leading reasons why you got into law. And I understand that right now you're working as a teacher, and I assume that on a daily basis you may be mainly concerned with teaching or grading or doing things of that sort. But I'm wondering, do you still find ways to get involved in social justice while being a teacher? And can you elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that every single aspect of life is for us an opportunity to get involved with social justice somehow. So when it comes to my lessons as a teacher, I program social justice into that. I was doing mock trials for one of my classes, and just through the topics that we were choosing or the scenarios that I would create for these mock trials, I could get certain social justice messages out there. Assignments that I would give my students. So I would assign them topics where they could sort of use social media to raise awareness on something or bring a call to action. So one of my students chose to speak about environmental issues and how environmental issues actually are the leading causes for many of the conflicts that we see around the world. So she used social media to kind of get her message across with that and how global warming is impacting that. So lots of opportunities within the classroom itself come up for me all the time. Outside of that, I use my Instagram profile to bring attention to issues that I see of importance. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking about Doug Ford and some of the things that he was trying to pull with election rules in order to essentially silence the voices of unions and anyone who was coming into opposition with him. So I spoke about that. I do have my YouTube channel as well. And recently I created a video designed to help fellow teacher candidates pass the math proficiency test. So anything that I can really do to get involved, I don't lose the opportunity. Again, balancing that with home life and staying healthy. I hope that answered your question.
That was a great answer. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anybody else who would like to ask one or two last questions before we wrap it up. Or if you want to say anything, Aisha, you can go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for coming. I don't know if I introduced myself in the beginning because I think we had like a little bit of a bumpy start, but I'm the founder of Pre-Law Shadowers, and I'm really, really grateful that you came, and this was such an informative session. Usually, I don't know if you've seen our recordings, but it's Christina kind of asks like guiding questions, and then based on that, it becomes a Q&A throughout the entire thing. But I love how prepared you were, and your slides were so aesthetically pleasing as well. It was really easy to follow everything you were saying. I'm really excited to put the recording up there and to put a little highlight clip on our Instagram for the people that couldn't be here, because I'm just glad that we got to attend and that you came to our session today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and you guys are doing absolutely amazing work with this. I wish something like this was around when I was trying to get into law school. It certainly would have helped me out a lot. But yeah, again, thanks for having me. And you guys can always reach me if any of you ever have questions about the whole process or any of the things we talked about today. I'm happy to help.
Thank you once again. I will end the recording. For those of you who are watching the recording on YouTube, once again, thank you for watching and taking the time out of your day today. We hope that you learned something. And for those of you that are here right now, thank you once again for joining today and being as interactive as you were. I will stop the recording now.